Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and we are back with part 2 with Dr. Stephen Kupferman. We're going to get into the juicy details of the medical sales history that he has seen from the beginning of his career. We're going to talk about more around the world of medical sales reps in his space. And we're going to get into, of course, the wonderful service that he provides with MedVA, revolutionizing the way clinicians work. So I'm not going to say anything more about that episode, but there is one thing I want to touch on. Before we move on to the episode today, there is something I want to address, and it is ageism in the medical sales space. So here's the deal. Anyone that has the skill set, the competency, the wherewithal, the emotional intelligence, a bachelor's degree, which always helps, and a true drive that's part of their core, whatever that is, to step into a medical sales role, whether it be a medical device role, a pharma role, a biotech role, you can do it. And I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, or even 60, you can do it. Now, ageism is when there's a bias against someone of a certain age for a specific role. Do I believe ageism is real? Absolutely. I see it all the time. Do I believe that should stop someone from wanting to pursue something they want? Absolutely not. Do I believe that because that's real and you want to go after something that you think you might not be a good fit for? Absolutely not. You should go for it. And I'll give you a hypothetical example. Let's say you're 42 and you've been a successful business person. We'll leave it at that. And now you want to enter medical sales. Maybe it's pharmaceutical, maybe it's medical device. You have a great sales record. You understand how to develop relationships. The work you've previously been doing speaks for itself, but you're not sure if a hiring manager is going to take you seriously because they're eyeing that 30-year-old or even 25-year-old fresh sales rep or more recent sales rep that they could potentially pay less than that wants the same position you're interviewing for. This world is too dynamic to believe that you don't have a sure shot. I would go as far as to say it doesn't matter if you're 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. What matters is you need to be able to answer why you're making these moves. And I think that's what gets lost in translation when trying to explain to other people what they can and cannot do. Anyone that wants to get into this industry that has some sort of degree, the drive, the ambition, and can showcase that they can actually be competent within a role can get a position, especially if you're someone that's had solid working experience beneath you and now you want to make a transition. The challenge for you is not going to be that it's going to take forever to get a position. It's not going to be that no one's going to want you. It's going to be that you simply need to make sure you can answer the questions, because the questions are going to be, why do you want to start over now? Why do you want to make this transition now? What has happened in your current role when you've had such a great experience and you've set up such a track record that makes you want to transition now? What are your plans for the future? Where do you want to be in the next 5 years if you were to get this kind of position now? Those are the questions that might be asked, and those are definitely the questions that are floating around in a hiring manager's mind when they're sitting in front of a person that fits what we're describing now, which is, a 40 to 45-year-old individual that wants to make a career change. But I have to stress that if this is what you want, you need to go and do it, because it can happen, and we see it happen all the time. We see entrepreneurs become medical sales reps. We see waitresses become medical sales reps. We see guys that have manned bars for 15 years become medical sales reps. Scrub techs, physical therapists, speech therapists. The gamut runs long of all the people that can get into this space. And a lot of them were 35, 36, 37, 38, 40, 41. So if this is you and you're someone out there and you're thinking about this, but you're thinking age is the reason why you probably won't get as far as you want, do not let that be your determining factor. Just be clear that you can explain why, right? Get in front of whatever someone can question and start thinking about that now. So I'm going to move on to the interview now. I really had to get that out there, though, because that just recently happened, and it made me realize that it needs to be better communicated. There's going to be natural challenges for anyone. Literally, even the 10-year seasoned sales rep that wants to be a medical device sales rep. There's a hiring manager that's going to think, well, he probably or she probably has all these bad habits we might have to untrain. I'm not sure I want someone that seasoned. Or the 5-year rep, they're probably going to say, well, we want to do something really unique with this team, so we don't even want someone with experience. I mean, there are so many different situations for so many different companies, and then put a whole layer on top of that of so many different types of hiring managers and what their immediate needs are. The goal for you is to get crystal clear about who you are as a brand and what you can deliver, and sit in that and own that regardless of your age. And then when you sit down with whoever hiring manager, you can answer any question they ask you and give them the confidence that hiring you is going to be one of the best hires they ever made. All right. And now I really do hope you enjoy this interview.
So I think, again, a lot of this preceded me. Medical device companies, drug companies really wanted to get doctors' attention. And doctors were very successful in the 80s and the 70s. And they needed to go above and beyond to get doctors' attention. And I'm assuming that they went in with good intentions to try to get doctors' attention. And, it wasn't uncommon, at least not from my experience, from anecdotes that I'd heard, for doctors to be taken on, vacations to wherever to be told and explained about products that were new to the market that are probably the mainstay of medicine today. And that there was misuse of that privilege that medical device companies and drug companies had to teach doctors about what they were working on, what their R&D was. I think probably, at least in my mind right now, the most blatant of this is probably, Purdue Pharmaceuticals, because it's all over, TV right now.
Sure.
Where things were just not done properly. And I'm not going to speak specifically to the Purdue thing because, I don't know. I just remember being educated by the board of medicine about pain, and that we weren't giving enough pain medications,
Wow.
So anyway, but in general, I think that that things were just taken out of context, and just people were taking advantage of this privilege, and so it just spiraled out of control. And I think it's called the Sunshine Act. Is that the term for it? Or whatever?
That's absolutely right. Yep.
And so now there's tremendous restrictions on it. I think it's probably working out okay in many ways. Sometimes there's an inability for things to get done because of that. But I think that there was probably a lot of good that came of those Hawaii vacations or whatever they were, where doctors were taught about drugs that are probably, again, the mainstay of today's modern medicine, or sort of, let's just say, plates and screws that that doctors needed to know about because they were using wires to hold bones together back then. And and so there was probably a lot of good that was done there, and got doctors' attention to move medicine into the 21st century. But it got out of control.
Got it. So it got out of control, and you're right. You're saying that that was before your time, and guess what? That was before my time as well. So you only hear the stories, but how has that affected how things work today? Would you say that when a new rep comes into your office, are you skeptical at first? Do you kind of test them out? Do you assume the best and give them the benefit of the doubt? How has everything you've heard and what you've experienced as a practitioner played into what happens when a new rep comes into your office?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's definite, everybody, I think everybody, or at least I work, sort of trust and verify. Like I always sort of trust and will take many meetings with reps. But I need to sort of verify things, make sure that it's really in my best interest to spend more time learning about it and then potentially, using it. I think for me, that probably the most recent drug, as an example, that I sort of can remember was a drug called Exparel, which is it's an injection for pain that's given um, in several fields. But as it pertains to me, it's essentially what I tell patients is a long acting Novocaine. So of course
Okay.
nobody uses Novocaine any longer. And so this is Marcaine, which is a very long acting local anesthetic. And it's been around for a very long time, Marcaine, um, or bupivacaine. And somebody created a liposomal version of it where it's
Sure.
sort of in a cocoon for several days, and slowly the cocoon opens up and then the molecules of the Marcaine dissolve out into the soft tissue, and then it numbs the area sort of on a long standing basis. So it's sort of an extended release local anesthetic.
Sure.
Um, and it's a drug, it's a new drug, a new injection that I was going to be giving to my patients. And prior to that, and I started using this about 9 years ago, like when it first kind of started coming out, and I was a little skeptical. I don't need that. My patients are fine. They do well with their pain. I give them a little bit of Vicodin, and they're fine. And then I started using this, and I realized that it became a game changer for me. That on less than 5% of my patients uh, get a narcotic at this point, whereas
Nice.
I used to give 20 to 40,
Wow.
narcotic tablets after I took out a set of wisdom teeth. And so now I don't use it anymore. And I was one of the early people to do it because I had a connection to one of the guys who was working for the company, who was working with who was friends with one of my anesthesiologists, and so they gave me a little lecture about it and told me about it. And
Mhm.
then the anesthesiologist like, Steve, you got to try this out. It's really good. I think you should use it. And then I was like, okay, well, give me a few vials and I'll start using it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
started using it, and it was like, oh my god, this is
Wow.
incredible.
Hmm.
And it's such a simple idea, drug. It's not like some huge novel thing. It was just such a
Right.
simple idea that I wish you start using. You're like, why didn't I think about this?
Okay.
And then I just started using it, and then a few local people asked me to talk about it, and some of these well-established surgeons would call me and say, well, how do you do it, how do you give it? And now, like I said, I don't routinely, when I was a resident, I used to prescribe 30, 40 Vicodin after a set of wisdom teeth. And now I don't prescribe any. I don't prescribe any
Wow.
narcotics.
Yeah. That's good.
And most of the surgeons around here have kind of, jumped on, and they use it as well. And so it's an incredible drug, and works really well. And now that I told that story, I forgot what question you asked, but um, but it was, I was skeptical. Yeah, I was, at first I was very skeptical about it, and then once I started using it, and I realized, wow, why didn't I think about this myself?
Mhm.
And now I use it every day on every single set of wisdom teeth that I take out, and maybe I haven't checked the numbers, but it's somewhere in the sub 5% of patients that get any sort of narcotic.
Wow. So I'm sure you're thinking of the rep that introduced this to you. Did they have a new level of credibility after you started using it? And said, "Wow, this is." Did it change how you interact with reps, or did it just change how you interact with that rep?
Well, to be honest, like I said, it came through a doctor
Okay. Okay.
who
Okay.
was
I see.
lecturing for the company.
I see. I see.
And then once we started ordering, then the rep came, and it was like I didn't even have to. The
It was
rep
like
didn't
I'm,
have to
I'm already
say a
there,
word.
man.
Yeah, the rep was really lucky. The rep could have been a virtual rep working remotely.
That's
In
hilarious.
fact, I think my virtual assistants, they order it. Like when when we see we're running low, we call
Yeah,
the, my nurse sends a message to our one of our virtual assistants. The virtual assistant picks up the phone, calls the rep, and says, "We need 500 vials of Exparel," and they pay for it and shows up, and that's it.
that's it. That's it. That's a fantastic story. Uh, on that note, these lectures that you attend, was this a dinner program? Was this a lunch program? Was this something else?
It was at the annual meeting. It was at our annual meeting. I think they had
Got it.
sponsored, you
Got
know,
it.
I don't even know if it was a lunch or anything. I think it was just a sponsored thing at the annual meeting. And
At the annual meeting. So the annual meeting for the medical group.
for oral surgeons, the American
Oh, for okay.
Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons had a, it was a, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2014 or so, something
Got it.
something like that, 2015. Yeah.
If it had been a dinner program promoting this drug, would you have gone? Honestly.
It really depended upon like what would have been going on with in my life, like
Okay.
if my kids needed me that night, or if my wife was like, "We're not going."
So it's less than 50-50 that you would have even, if it hadn't been for that annual meeting, you still might not know about it.
Well, I would know about it because it's probably all over, but I wouldn't have been the innovator or at least one of the early adopters of it, right?
Adopters of it.
And that
Sure.
and that was important, because I as many doctors do, but I know for me in particular, I live in a community, even though it's in a big city, and I know a lot of the people, and they know me. They, my patients get my cell phone number, almost all the
Right.
time, and so
Right.
pain's a big deal,
Right.
and these are teenagers mostly, and so to me it was huge to not have to give my friends' kids narcotics,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
I was starting to everybody was starting to learn about that and realize how off the profession was about narcotics.
Sure.
And I wanted them to be out of pain. These are these are people I know as kids,
Right. Right. Right.
and so once I had, luckily it had been brought to my attention early on, and I jumped on it. I jumped on it early. But I think this kind of brings up an important point. It wasn't as much the rep as it was the doctor, right? And the reps were obviously involved behind the scenes, but
Yeah.
when reps can find doctors that really know
Take
their
it.
stuff, that are
Mm-hmm.
experts,
Yeah.
and they can sort of utilize them, I think it's very helpful, and it builds credibility, especially when they're really well respected doctors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one thing I want to talk about that kind of is the theme of this conversation, which is remote working. And you know that with COVID and everything that's happened, reps also have become rather remote in trying to get access to providers like yourself. Tell us, how do you receive that? Well, first of all, ask this: are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn.
Okay, are you active on LinkedIn?
No, I'm not active, but I do have virtual people helping me out with my LinkedIn. But don't tell
You're
LinkedIn
remotely on
that.
LinkedIn. All right.
Don't tell
So
LinkedIn that.
what I want to ask is, there's this the medical sales world. So medical device companies, pharmaceutical sales companies. Let's just call them medical sales companies. They are trying to be more innovative in going along with this remote approach to everything, including medicine. And now you have reps that are trying to get access to you remotely. I'm sure you get emails. You've been getting emails. You might even get some video newsletters, and you might even get reached out on LinkedIn. I want to know from you, out of those modalities, what are you most receptive to, and if none of them, what do you think you'd be most receptive to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that LinkedIn is necessarily the best way to get through to doctors. It's a good way to get through to decision makers, to people who are running medical enterprises. But the typical practicing doctor who the medical rep is sort of looking for is not really LinkedIn. They're not doing that on a day to day basis because it's a time sucker. It's a real time sucker. So
All right.
I think the typical practitioner is probably using more Facebook, more Instagram, um, and at least the practicing physicians. And so I think good old going to offices is still a you know it's a grind for medical device reps, but I think it still works, and it really a door to door knocking is still important. I haven't really thought about too much like how to get through to the typical practicing doctor, but
Yeah.
in general, I don't think LinkedIn's the way to go. I don't think email is the way to go. I don't think doctors have enough time to get through that. I mean, the typical
Gotcha.
practicing doctor is responding to patient emails
Right.
all
Right.
night long.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I don't think that, video emails are gonna fly. I think
Are gonna make any difference?
yeah, I think you're gonna get them on Facebook, you're gonna get them on Instagram, but you're not gonna get them with an email. What doctors want to get away from email, because especially doctors that are working in large healthcare systems, because every patient has email access to them, and they're emailing them, at all hours, which is
Right.
why I think burnout is so high.
Right.
So
Right.
again, I don't pretend to be an expert on how to reach doctors to sell them things.
Sure.
But I do think that there are ways to get through to doctors, and I do think door to door is still a way to go.
So, according to Dr. Kupferman, door to door, Facebook, and then Instagram. So, after this podcast, if you receive a Facebook message from a rep, you would respond.
Well, I don't think Facebook message as much
I
as
see.
advertising on Facebook, because I
I see.
think I think doctors, it's an out for them. It's an outlet for them, right? It's an easy outlet when you're sitting in bed or whatever you're doing. I think doctors are going on Facebook. I think there are Facebook groups that doctors are going on.
Gotcha.
But I don't think Facebook message is going to work, because I don't know if they're going to sit and start messaging back and forth with a rep. But I think if you're advertising and you're trying to catch someone's attention, that's a way to do
It's a
it.
good platform to do it on.
I think so.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Well,
And
that's
then
where
we'll close.
that's where that's where Medva advertises on Facebook. So
I see. See that. So that's why it's Facebook. Got it. Now
yeah,
it's
I
making
think,
sense.
and that doesn't just come out of nowhere. I think we do that because I think a lot of other companies do that as well, because I think that's where
Gotcha.
doctors are. I don't know how many doctors are really on LinkedIn that are practicing on a day-to-day basis, because they're kind of working. We're talking about the practicing doctor. The practicing doctor
Right.
is not looking to get a new job or make connections to other job places, and trying to figure out other job opportunities. There are some, but if they're looking for another job opportunity, it's probably not to practice endocrinology somewhere else. They're looking to to run a clinic, or run a program somewhere, or run something. And that's the people who I think are on LinkedIn. I could be wrong.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, just as someone who spends quite a bit of time on LinkedIn, to your point, there are providers that just don't have time for it. But then there are a lot of providers that are getting on that space to exercise thought leadership, and it's working. And a lot of the newer providers, those that are coming out of residency in the last 5 years, and they're new providers now, it's very common, because that's kind of generation. I don't even know what letter generation that is, but this generation is all about social media
Right.
in every profession, especially medicine. So when you have your 33, 34-year-old new provider that's out there doing his thing, he's actually expecting to be on a platform like LinkedIn for thought leadership, and to advertise as well for whatever he might be doing it within his practice or her practice.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that there's a very small percentage of them that are working in the private sector. I think that's known data,
Sure.
so that's why I would say less, less likely, but because the private sector, I'm talking mostly about the private sector. Um, so that's probably why I have a little bit of a different, opinion on it,
Different
because
take on it, right?
like, we're not for Medvo, we're not really looking for people who are working for some large healthcare system, because
Which
they're not
which
going
is
to
the
be able to.
majority now. Which is the majority now. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Although I think that the large healthcare systems ought to look into virtual assistants, because I really do think that even a doctor who's working for some large healthcare system has so much on their plate that a virtual assistant who's, say, a nurse in the Philippines, will be invaluable. And the cost is so low
Hmm.
that if some large healthcare system, called us and said we need, 30 virtual assistants for 60 doctors who were piloting out, a burnout, an anti-burnout, so that they have somebody there to answer their emails for them as a nurse, to just review them and pick out the ones that are most urgent and that are real, you know, I think it would really help the burnt out doctors.
Are we developing a new client for you right now, doctor? Is that what's happening? Is that what's happening?
I mean, like I said, I think it's the biggest problem in medicine. I don't think that's a
Sure.
secret. It's the biggest problem
Yeah.
in medicine right now.
Yeah.
And so I think that if a healthcare, group is really looking to take care of their doctors, which they should be, um, they still are going to need to have them see patients, and there are not enough doctors to see, and we can't make enough doctors fast enough. Just like we can't get enough pilots fast enough to get more flights
Yeah.
out, we can't get
Yeah.
doctors out fast enough. So you got to make sure the ones that are there that are really good don't burn out. And the only way to make them not burn out is to support them. And having, a nurse who's at their basically at their beck and call all day at any time, doing things in conjunction with them, is I think is the answer.
Got it. So before we close, I kind of want to go in that direction. I want you to kind of project 5, 10 years out. Let's go 10 years out from here, from today. Where, and because physician burnout is a very real thing, and it kind of plays into this whole, the Great Resignation, everything that's going on, the anticipated recession, and physician burnout. I mean, they all kind of play in the same circles. Where do you, if something is not done to really stifle physician burnout, where do you see healthcare going? Like, what do you think will change, or what will be impacted as this continues and it's not well addressed?
So, I mean, I think that the trajectory is pretty clear that doctors are going to retire early. They're gonna bounce out, when they realize that there's just too much for them to keep on their plate, to keep track of, to answer to. Um, I think part of this, a small part, but part of this is that, one of the last saving graces of a doctor, being, besides the gratification of taking care of patients, I think that the medical representatives really made them feel, you know, they made them feel good. They
Sure.
took them out to dinner. They gave them whatever it was, and that got stripped from doctors. Now the young guys probably don't know much about that, but it really was stripped from doctors. And I think it does play a small part in burnout, where, the reps, like we talked about earlier, sort of getting paid more sometimes than the doctors. And so,
Right.
when you put that much responsibility on somebody, of life and death, and then, they have there's no gratification other than saving a life, it leads to burnout. And I think that if we continue to go down this path where doctors are, you know, treated like the worst of the doctors who maybe took advantage of certain things, particularly
Yeah.
with respect to medical device reps, and what they can and can't, do, with and for doctors, and doctors having more and more put upon them, and less doctors in the pipeline to take care of the, aging population, that is accelerating. I think we're headed for, less people wanting to go into medicine, um, poor candidates going into the field,
Hmm.
um, and it's not a pretty sight. Doctors are supposed to be, the most, glorified, profession, in our
Right.
country, and
Right.
we need to get back to that.
Got it. Got it. And Medva, aka MedVA, is going to do everything it can to get back to that.
Correct. I think that, having people handle, so much of the administrative stuff, for doctors, in whatever, wherever you're working, so that you can, be a doctor and take care of patients and get back to that, the glory days of medicine, I think is really the future.
I love it. One last thing for MedVA. For a practice to say, yes, we want to work with you, to fully operational with MedVA implemented and working and doing it and doing what it does, what's the timeline?
If you would go on right now, you click on the contact us, fill out a form, you'll have an appointment with somebody within 24 to 48 hours, and you'll have candidates within 24 hours after that. Within a week, you'll have somebody working in your office.
Got it, got it. And is there normally a learning curve that kind of comes into play, or is the team that you have available so proficient that they can kind of jump into almost any situation?
So we have a lot of onboarding things that need to be done, and we do everything we can to support all of our new clients. Not just getting them the right person, but helping train and pick the right person for the particular needs that they're looking for. There's always an onboarding process that is needed for anybody, but
Sure.
you won't be able to find somebody this quickly to work in your office. Forget all the cost saving benefits and all that, but to get somebody working in your office in under a week, it's just not possible today.
Right. I love it. Okay. All right. We're going to have a little bit of fun before we log off. This is called the lightning round. I'm going to ask you four very general questions, and you're going to give me your quickest answer in the 10 seconds. And we'll start right away. All right. So, best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Pass.
So, does that mean not a reader, too many books to mention, or what does that mean?
I read weird books, things that you wouldn't necessarily want to publish on a podcast. Um, they're more religious books, books about Israel, books about the Holocaust, things like that. So they're probably the titles themselves are not necessarily.
Okay. How about your favorite book? How
I
about
would
that?
say my favorite book is the Checklist Manifesto. So I think that's a better question.
Checklist Manifesto. Excellent. I
Yeah.
will be looking into that one. Okay. And then the best movie you've watched in the last 6 months.
Best movie I watched. I just watched. I think it's called 12 Strong.
Okay.
It's about the sort of first U.S. military that went to Afghanistan after 9/11,
Oh, okay. That sounds
um,
interesting. All
and
right.
uh, and they were in the mountains, and it was an incredible win in that initial war.
Uh-huh.
Phenomenal movie.
Wow. Okay. 12 strong. Best meal you've had in the last 6 months.
My wife is an incredible cook, so it's pretty much a daily basis, which
Whatever she makes.
whatever she makes.
You got to stay safe. I understand that one. All right. And then lastly, best experience you've had in the last 6 months.
Best experience I've had in the last 6 months. I was telling you earlier, I had just came back from Bali.
Okay.
Um, just an incredible island, in a much different country than the island itself is,
Sure.
and the people there are just incredible. Their customer service is far above what we provide here in our country, and we have a lot to learn from them.
Absolutely. Wow. Fantastic. Well, Dr. Kupferman, it was awesome having you on the show today. Thank you for spending time with us. We'll be following you. Where's the best way people can find out about Medva, aka MedVA?
Yeah, just go to our website, www.medva.com.
And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, where's the best place to find you?
You can email me at Dr. Kupferman at medva.com.
All right. Thanks for the time, Doctor.
All right. Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Definitely. And that was Dr. Stephen Kupferman with part two. It's interesting how he's described his take on the utilization of social media to reach providers. Facebook is his go-to, but for obvious reasons with MedVA. And what an amazing thing MedVA is doing, really creating all those virtual workers for clinicians to make healthcare work just that much better. And hopefully insurance companies will buy in to what he's offered on the episode. So maybe you've listened to this episode and you're thinking to yourself, I really want to work in a space like this. I want to have customers like this. I want to be able to have a good contribution to some of these issues that were brought up during this episode. And you know medical sales is for you. Or maybe you don't know where you want to be in medical sales. You were in pharmaceutical sales and you think about med device, or you're in med device and you're trying to explore what other options are out there, or you're not in med sales at all and you're trying to see which one is a good fit for you. Well, you now have a resource that you can go to, utilize right away that will not only give you the clarity on where you should be, but help you get there and actually put you there. And that's right there at Evolve Your Success. Go to evolveyoursuccess.com, select Attain a Medical Sales Program. Actually, select Attain Medical Sales Role, and then take a look at our medical sales program and just scroll down, read what we do, see how it works, submit some information, have a call with one of us at Evolve Your Success, and let's get you where you want to be. As always, we do our best to bring you innovative guests that have a different perspective, that are true pioneers of industry, making healthcare, making medical sales, making everything in the healthcare space work that much better. So make sure you tune in again for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.